What does God want His church to be? And we talked about the foundation to the church. Who's the foundation building for?
Jesus.
Jesus. And how do we know anything about Jesus?
The Gospels and prophets.
Yeah, what's another way of saying that? You know,
Bible.
the Bible, right? The New Testament, but the Bible. That's how we know who Jesus is, what He did, what He taught. So the foundation of the church is the Bible. So you want to know about Jesus? You've got to look in the Bible. What does He want His church to be? Well, you don't look this up on Wikipedia or just, what the preacher says. You've got to go back, not just tradition, but what does the Bible say? That's where the buck really has to stop there. So we're talking about this, and last week we talked about the beginning of the church, around AD, 29, 30 or so. The church started, and for the first, this line right here represents 300 years. We're talking about the timeline of the church, right? We're going back 2,000 years. Church started around AD 29. And for 300 years, this line's straight because the church pretty well stayed on target. Not perfect, because you got imperfect people. But, for the most part, the church did okay. And you find this, number one, because look at Acts 2:42. Acts 2:42, I think tells us one of the keys why the church was able to stay on task, so to speak. And this is early on, but it says they, talking about the church, committed themselves to the, who's teaching? Apostles' teaching. Now, why is the apostles' teaching so important?
It's from God.
It's from God. It's Jesus' teaching, right? So, because you remember, they couldn't say, okay, let's turn over to the book of Acts. They were Acts. You know what I mean? I take that for granted, right? But think about it. Until they had the completion of the New Testament, which was not till around if this is 80, 29, we're talking about not till around 90 or 100 AD that the New Testament was finished. So, the first century, for sure, where you had an apostle and you had a prophet. I mean, it was piecemeal. You had some books that were done, and then, some books weren't finished till the end, like Revelation. The Gospel of John wasn't written until later. And so they had to hang on the words of the apostles. And so they committed themselves. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. And by the way, isn't that what we're doing here this morning? Every time we open up the New Testament, we're committing ourselves, just like the early church, to God's Word. By the way, what's this word church literally mean? It's the called out ones. What are we called out? Remember those two circles? Called out of the world to be more like God. In holiness, in our character, integrity, and all those things. So, number one, apostles' teaching. They committed themselves. They were devoted. And what I'm saying is they stayed true to the Bible pretty good the first 300 years. I mean, they deviated somewhat, but for the most part, they were pretty solid to this. Number two thing that really helped them stay on track was persecution. And you may think, persecution? How is that a good thing? Well, for the first 300 years, there were 10 major periods of persecution in the church. First, it started out within the Jews. Look in the book of Acts. The Pharisees, the religious leaders, Sadducees, they were throwing the apostles in jail. And then it spread out to the Roman Empire, where it became illegal to be a Christian. You had guys like Diocletian, Nero, throwing them into the arena, killing Christians. systematic persecutions at times. It's pretty tough. But what ended up happening was it really had a purification process to the church. Because you didn't just sign up in that day, I'm just going to go to church and, because you really had to think about it. Am I going to be a Christian or not? Because if I'm going to be a Christian, that means they could confiscate my house, they could kill my children, lose my job. Let's say this Sunday, if you came, you might lose your job. You think that might affect our attendance a little bit? I don't know. We find out really quick. You see, it's pretty easy to be a Christian in our country, but in other countries it's not. And that's the way it was back in the first century. That's the way it is over in China sometimes. Some other places you have to go on the ground. True story, understand, Tim LaHaye tells this story about back in the days of the Iron Curtain, behind the Iron Curtain, USSR, staunch communists, and where being a Christian was pretty much Bible studies were not allowed. And you had this group of Christians that were meeting together behind locked doors. They got their Bibles out, which they weren't supposed to have, and they were doing a Bible study. Secretly. And then all of a sudden, pounding on the door, it's these Russian soldiers. They got their guns, they come in and say, hey, we know what you're doing here, you're having a Bible study, this is illegal. But I tell you what, we're going to give you a chance just to renounce this Christianity thing and just leave and be done with it. And so, a few of the people, not many, but I think maybe a few of them have said, okay, well, I think I'm out of here. But the rest of them stayed. And then the soldiers closed the doors, locked them, and they had their guns, these other Christians just waiting for the worst, Then all of a sudden the soldiers, true story, put down their guns, pull out their Bibles. And say, we're Christians too. We just had to know who was genuine. We couldn't risk it. You see how persecution, even though it's a difficult thing to go through, can sometimes have a purification effect? It's like when you put metal, the smelting process of cleansing, you heat metal up to a certain degree, and then what happens to all the impurities? Rise to the top, sweep them away, or they burn up. I think that's what happens sometimes in the church. When things get tough, a lot of times, the people who are sincere, who are very devoted to the Lord, no matter what, they're going to be there. And so as a result, the church grew. It's like in China. Or in other places where sometimes it's very Sudan, sometimes the Christian, the church is flourishing over in Africa. You don't hear about this over in Asia. It's exploding. While here it's decreasing, over there it's exploding. And I think sometimes because it's a little more difficult. Well, that's what's happening with early church. But around AD 312, a guy named Constantine became emperor. You've heard of Emperor Constantine. He was going to this battle called the Milvian Bridge. He said he saw a sign in the air, or whether he dreamt it, but he saw this shield that had an insignia on it. It was the first two letters of Christ's name, Chi and a Rho. And it was like an epiphany for him. At least this is what history records, that his eyewitness, he says he saw this, and it changed him. Whereas before he was kind of like a pagan, he had a saw the light kind of moment, and he was vying for the control of the empire at this point, the Roman Empire. And he put those insignias on his soldiers' shields that represented Christianity, and he won. He defeated his rival, and when he became the sole ruler of the empire, he made Christianity the legal religion. And whereas before it was illegal to be a Christian, now he made it legal. And he went beyond that. He in fact, gave tax breaks to Christians to build basilicas, churches. You know, before the first 300 years, there were no church buildings per se. I mean, the Roman Empire, you didn't just go build a church building because it was illegal, right? So they met in homes and things like that, new school buildings. But now, imagine, whereas before you were being persecuted, now the government is flipping the bill to help pay for some of the church buildings. You imagine if you lived during the transition to that time, it'd be amazing. It's a great thing, but also at the same time, whereas before, you know, it was difficult, but people stayed true. Now, as it got a little easier, people kind of let down their guard. And let's say our Governor Scott, right, his name? Let's say that for the month of November, everybody that goes to church in Lake County, you just got to bring your bulletin to the courthouse or so. You get a $1,000 deductible off your taxes this year. You think church attendance is going to increase in the month of November? Yeah, probably so, right? Do you think our devotion and sincerity are going to increase in the month of November? Probably not. You see what was happening in the Roman Empire? Things started getting pretty easy, and then things started to get a little more corrupt, and they started getting away from the Bible. And that's when they got in trouble. In fact, let me give you, because we're going to go down the list here. Got all these different lines. AD 325, something came in called creeds. Creed is just a man-made document, but the word creed means I believe, or we believe. This is a statement, what we believe. And let me give you a scripture to go along with this. Mark chapter 7, verses 1 through 7. Got your Bibles, go and turn over that. Now listen, in the beginning, these creeds, these statements of belief, the church started, doing. It was good intentions, because you have people in the first centuries, some of them were teaching things that were against the Bible. Like a guy named Marcion, Arius. Some of them were taking things out of the Bible, adding things to, saying Jesus wasn't really, the forerunner of the Jehovah's Witnesses was the Arians, a guy named Arius. Taught the same thing that Jehovah's Witnesses teach. Jehovah's Witnesses, they're not teaching anything new today. They're teaching an old heresy. But in order to prevent that from coming in the church, they would say, okay, we need you to look over this document, make sure you believe that God is the Creator, Jesus is fully God. A lot of it was just biblical statements. You heard of the Apostles' Creed? Some of you grew up with the Apostles' Creed? The Apostles didn't write that creed, right? That was written well after the Apostles had died. Now, a lot of it is good stuff, but it was one of these documents. And in the beginning, I think, good intentions, but what happens with these, sometimes, like, in addition to the Bible type things, right? There's an evolution of these things. But Jesus warned, he said in Mark chapter 7, starting in verse 1, he says, some of the Pharisees, religious leaders, teachers of the law, come from Jerusalem, gathered around Jesus, saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were unclean, that is, unwashed. And parenthetically, Mark says, the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come in from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And they observe many other traditions, such as the washing of cups and pitchers and kettles and their other dishes. Listen, this wasn't for hygiene. They weren't taking the antiseptic soap and, cleaning. Oh, we got to make sure because they didn't know anything about that at this point, right? This was all for ceremony, for show, because you've been out there in the marketplace. You know who's out in the marketplace? Gentiles, those dirty, rotten, nasty Gentiles. You got to get Gentile cooties off your hand. You know what I mean? And so they take a little bit of oil, ceremony, they pour it down, and if you really hold it, you pour it back down. Well, Now I'm ready to do God's service. Well, this was not in the Bible. And yet they treated it as though it were Bible. You know what I'm saying? You ever had some of those things in church? People, these traditions. Well, we've always done it this way. And it's like the Bible. You know what I'm saying? And so Jesus is dealing with this. And so the Pharisees, verse 5, the teacher of the law asked Jesus, why don't your disciples, your students, live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with unclean hands? And so Jesus, he gives us a good way to reply. He just quotes the Bible. He replied, Isaiah, a prophet from the Old Testament, was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. Man, Jesus didn't pull any punches, did he? By the way, when we think of hypocrite, what do we think of today? Says something, does something, say one thing, do something different. Sure. The word hypocrite in this day, though, was a term for a Greek play actor. You go down to the Greek theater, let's go see the hypocrites. That seems weird to us, but it was just a term to refer to these people who went on stage. They didn't have a lot of actors at that time. Sometimes a man would play multiple roles. The female, the villain, the good guy, all in one. So you know what he'd do? He'd take a mask and he'd put it on over his face. And then he'd take another mask and put it on. What was he doing? Pretending to be somebody else. You know what Jesus says? He takes that term that they would have known because there was these Greek theaters right around them, even though they were in Israel, because the Roman Empire loved to bring the Greek part to see it, the Greek culture. And Jesus says, you're just like these play actors. You guys are pretending. You're putting on one face, but really that's not who you are. And so Isaiah was right. These people, they honor me with their lips, but their hearts, they're far from me. They're not there. They worship me in vain. What's vain mean? Empty. Think about it. You're worshiping God, but it's empty. Their teachings, here's the thing, are but rules taught by men. Not God. You've let go of the commands of what? God, and are holding on to the traditions of men. In other words, he says, listen guys, you're taking the commandments of men and you're holding them in higher esteem than God's own word. And you do that, you know what you're doing? You're making your worship of me vain, empty. And so look, we're going to find out later on as we go down here that creeds, even though it started out as a good thing, what's going to happen is this church is going to have their creed, this church is going to have their creed, this church is going to have that creed. You know what? A lot of them are going to disagree with each other, and a lot of them are going to disagree with God's word. Instead of just saying, you know what? Do we need anything in addition to God's word? No. The Bible and the Bible alone is all we need to get us to heaven, to equip us here. Does that make sense? It's one of the reasons we're just trying to be a Bible church here. So, creeds came in and really would eventually hurt the church. AD 593, idea of purgatory. And if you want a scripture for that, Ephesians 2, 8 through 10. It's a good one. Hebrews 9:27. Listen, you understand the teaching of purgatory? The word purgatory comes from the word purge. And the church began to teach that after you die, before you go to heaven, there's this in-between place where unconfessed sins where you still needed to pay for your guilt, so to speak. You would go there and you had to work it off. And to spend so many hundreds of years, 1,000 years. And then you would get to go to heaven. Only problem is, I just don't find that in the Bible. So this was a teaching that was in addition to the Bible. And not only that, I think it goes against the principles of grace. That's what Ephesians 2 says. For it is by grace you've been saved. Through faith, trust. So it's not something you can merit. That's something you can work your way out of. Isn't that the whole point of grace? You can't do anything about it. So yeah, you're saved, but now you got to go pay the penalty. Jesus took away the guilt. That's what they teach, by the way. The Roman Catholic Church teaches that, yeah, Jesus took away the guilt, but you got to pay for the penalty. You still got to pay for it. And so, I just think, by the way, the Bible says it's appointed for man once to die, and after that to face judgment. It doesn't teach this in-between place in the sense where you have to go and have your sins purged. Jesus purged them. Jesus paid for everything. Listen, we're going to have a lesson later on, man's journey to destiny. We're going to talk about what happens to you after you die. We'll talk about that, but it does not include this place of purgatory, okay? I think that's anti-biblical. It's not in the Bible. It's a man-made document. And the church would seize on this later on and use this to really hurt, to get money from people, by the way. AD 660, the papacy. You know what I mean by this? The Pope, right? You have some scriptures for this, Hebrews 4, 14 through 16. Really, the whole book of Hebrews is good. Matthew 23:9. You know what the word Pope means? Pope, it comes from the idea of Papa, Father. Jesus says in Matthew 23:9, call no man Father. And I think this is the sense which he's talking about. Listen, in the church, we always have a tendency to emulate our culture around us. It's just hard not to do. Especially the government of the church. You know, the polity of the church, how you govern things. We in America, we're a republic, and we like, you know, to vote on a lot of things. A democratic nation. You know, and so that trickles down to the church, because a lot of times, you know, I don't know what church you come from, but hey, we got to vote on that. You know, we can't do this. You know, we don't do that a lot in this church. We don't vote on a lot of things. I don't like that, by the way. Because we've got to be careful. I know we live in America, but you know what? There's a certain government of the church that's set up God's way. And we'll talk about that in some other lessons. But you know who was in control during the first 1,000 years of the church, right? It was the Roman Empire. Who was the man in the Roman Empire? Caesar. It was the emperor, right? One man. And what happened, instead of having just localized leaders, shepherds, pastors, elders, the church began to emulate culture around them. And what you see is you have a chief elder, you know, chief bishop, archbishop, until eventually you get to a pope over the whole church. And, you know the Pope's title in some places in this country? You wouldn't have it here, but Lord God Almighty. I don't know about you, but when I saw what happened here in our country with that man coming here, it just turned my stomach. I think, do you think that's the way Christ, listen, when he came here? I mean, I'm not here to bash Roman Catholicism. But I'm just telling you the origins. The first pope, by the way, wasn't Peter. It was like Gregory I, 600 years after the fact. I just think this gets away from the way God wanted His church to be. And you see all the pomp and circumstances surrounding that. And when He speaks from His official chair, He speaks as though He were God speaking. That's blasphemy. Just can't happen, folks. This is the final word. Well, it's unfortunate. But listen, the Bible talks about this, that there's one mediator between man and God. You know who that is? Jesus Christ. Do I need any person to go through before I can go to the Father? Before I can approach the throne of grace? You know, that's why we say, I pray in Jesus' name. I have a direct hotline because through His work on the cross, His resurrection, I can go to Him. I don't need a priest to do that because, by the way, we're all priests in God's kingdom now. AD 1000, another teaching that came is Mass. And you know what Mass is, right? in the Roman Catholic Church, we take communion, and you got a wafer and juice, similar to what we do here for our Lord's Supper, but the priest officiant will say a prayer called a Mass, right? Let me put a word up here, and it's a big word, so just hang on. I can spell it. There it is. Transubstantiation. Aren't you glad you came this morning?
Yeah.
It's a big word, but look, just break it down. Substantiation is talking about substance, right? Trans, change. When the Roman Catholic priest prays a prayer over the elements, the bread and the juice, in this teaching, they say that it actually changes literally into the blood of Jesus and the body of Jesus. Literally. And by the way, that's why a lot of times I understand that priests will, you can't touch it, you know. And by the way, what do you do with that extra communion juice? If it's actually blood of Jesus? Can you just toss it down the drain? Yeah, you got a little problem there. Remember this, I think it's Matthew 23 and following. I think that's it. Jesus says to his disciples, take and eat, every one of you. Take this bread, this is my body. Take this juice, it is my blood. He said this is, but don't we use that kind of language every day? You know, I've been to some of your homes and you got pictures on the wall. And I look at those pictures and you can say, hey, come look, this is my family. You know, Joe says, come here, I want you to show you my family. And I see a picture of Joe and his family, and I say, wow, Joe, you guys are really small. That's your family, man. No, we don't do that. Because we know this is a representation. Right? I think Jesus was saying, listen, this represents what I'm about to do for you. Because listen, he hadn't died yet. How could that be his body? He's there with them. His blood, he hadn't shed it yet. He's just saying, listen, guys, this is emblematic. This symbolizes my body, my blood for you. It's going to be shed on the cross, right? And by the way, this idea that every time a Roman Catholic takes the Lord's Supper, every time this happens, in a sense, Jesus is being crucified all over again. That's by the way, you know, you ever seen the difference in like a Roman Catholic cross and like our crosses? What's the difference?
Jesus is on it.
He's still on it. According to Hebrews, I believe it's 9:28. Let me look this up. Let me finish with this. Hebrews 9:27-28 says, verse 20, so Christ was sacrificed once, one time, to take away the sins of many people. Talks about he'll appear again, but he died one time and it's over, it's done. He's not having to be re-crucified, sacrificed all over again. It's done. And the effects continue. The blood of Christ continues to cleanse, but he's off the cross. So I think this is a sad misunderstanding of what Jesus was just trying to say. Remember me, guys. This ordeal, this idea of him, this actual blood and the body of Jesus, I think that misses the point, and it takes it in the wrong sense. Does that make sense? And by the way, this should unite Christians. Coming around the table, it's been one of the things that divides, unfortunately. It's unfortunate. Hey, we're out of time. Let's bow our heads. God, we thank you for another class. Help us to continue to take this in piecemeal, God, so that we can understand the big picture of where the church started out, where they got off track, and Lord, how they got back on track in many cases. And so, Lord, help us to learn our lessons from history. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.